Hello, my loyal subjects, and welcome! Today we're going to be talking about how to use group instances in Blender. Because, honestly, they are one of my favorite things nowadays. So, for those who do not know, I'm an environment artist, among other things, when I'm not making shaders. Matter of fact, environment is kind of one of my primary things, so this is something I whipped up really quickly. This is a little sci-fi corridor just with some basic inverted tiles that I can use with two sides. So anyway, made this little corridor. And this is entirely made out of what are called group instances, which you can see here. Each one of these acts like a single object, but they're actually composed of several objects. And they're actually an empty object. You'll notice I don't have a modifiers tab. This is kind of one of the downsides to them. I do wish they had modifier support, but they don't. But you can see they are technically an empty object that just looks like another kind of object. Or a group of objects in this case. But there are some other advantages other than them just being convenient to splatter around your scene and transform. They run really, really quickly. Even though this is probably ranging in the tons and tons of polygons, this is actually running pretty well in my viewport. Reason being, hardware instancing. It's amazing. Lets you render the same bit of geometry over and over and over again. Same tactic can be applied to rendering. So normally, one of the limitations of using your graphics card to render stuff is the actual limitation of having enough memory. If you're constantly duplicating objects, by default Blender, when you Shift-D to duplicate an object, duplicates all the data that goes along with that object. The model, the everything. Now, what that essentially means is that when you duplicate an object, you are then copying all those polygons. And if you have an object that you've duplicated that has like 1,000,000 polygons, you're going to be in trouble very, very quickly. Because that means that you will start generating absolute tons and tons of polygons in memory, and your graphics card's just going to crap out on you, and it's just going to say, hey, yeah, you don't have enough memory, you can't render on the graphics card. Then you have to go back to CPU rendering, and it's a nightmare, and it's slow as hell. These also render faster than normal meshes, which is significantly faster. That's not to say that they're a magic bullet and everything will render instantly and you will never ever have a problem with rendering again, but they are significantly faster. In some scenarios, again, it is very dependent on what you're actually rendering. However, they have one final advantage, which is that they can be used in an iterative workflow, which is the main reason I'm super partial to them myself, but that said, I'm not going to be covering that here. I'm going to be covering the iterative workflow thing in a future video. So yeah, for now, let's talk about how to actually use group instances and how I made this little panel. And for those who want to know, these are two group instances. One is a grate here, which I modeled, just a very, very simple little grate I modeled. Then we've got what I call a panel grate, which it's just a little inset science fiction panel with some little bevels on it that actually has that group instance for the grate inset inside of it. And if you want to see something really cool, if I go over here, and yeah, if I can manage to see around my microphone. So you can see here, I've got this. If I went and added a cube, just for the sake of showing it off, and I'm not going to be explaining what I'm doing here. If I went and added this, because I've used group instance, you're noticing it's not just cropping up on the grate instance that I added. Because this other group instance, this panel one, uses that group instance, like it works in a hierarchy, and it's really, really cool. This lets you edit your assets, and because it's, nested one within another, and I know this can kind of look complicated, but essentially, any changes you make will propagate to every copy of the model. Makes it really easy to make changes, apply materials, and just have a library of assets that you're copying all over your level. Really useful for environments. So, without further ado, let's dive in and let's talk about how you actually utilize these. So, let's start off with how we would actually create our object. You'd create your object normally, as you normally would. Let's say we've gone in and we've created our little asset or something like that. And I'm just throwing something together real quick. The inset tool is amazing, by the way, and I will at some point have to cover the amazingness that is the inset tool. You can add some modifiers if you want. And, I don't know, this sort of works. Whatever. We're going to call it good. So, there. There's our weird health pack thing. So, once you've got your asset looking how you want, you've got the material that you want, and so on, and ignore what I'm doing here, I'm just sort of creating something to look at. Let's just make that. Okay, so there we've looked at our object, we've rendered it, and we've said, okay, this is our go-to object, we're happy with this, and we're just going to now create, we now want to make copies of this throughout our scene. We've made our health pack here, now let's actually use this health pack. So, now we've created it, let's hit Control-G. This will add our object to a group. If you go to the Object tab, you can see the group it was added to. We can also change the name over in the Create Group tab, or over here in the group that it was actually put inside. And I'm going to name this, I'm just going to call this one Health Pack. And you can add multiple objects to this group if you wish. For example, I could go in here and say, let's spawn in a bolt, and then go in and add the bolt to our asset, and let's just say, I don't know, mirror it by the health pack. And then I can go and click this little Add to Group button, which will allow me to add to our health pack group. And you'll see it's now got that group. I can also change where it considers, it's offset from the group. This allows you to work if your object's like slightly offset or whatever. So anyway, here we've created our little group of objects. How do we use it? Well, if I jump over to another layer, or I don't even have to, but I'm going to because I don't want to clutter up my view, I can now add something called a group instance. If I add this health pack, you'll see my health pack is here. One thing I immediately notice is that my editing runs slightly faster. It's a minor difference, especially with an asset this simple, but we can easily make duplicates, and whereas Blender normally stutters a bit, having to duplicate all that model information, it actually goes really, really quickly when we're duplicating these assets. So, as you can see, I've created a ton of them, and you'll also notice this also breaks our triangle count and our vertice count and all this stuff. Sadly, that stuff does not update, but if I just render this, you'll notice this actually renders really quickly. And again, this is all relative, so it's relative to my computer, but this stuff runs measurably quickly. And I can feel it myself because I'm used to how fast my computer renders stuff. And you'll probably feel a similar difference. Obviously, your mileage will vary. So anyway, it can really, really help when you're making lots of copies of a mesh. Now, once we've created our group instances, we can then go in and add extra bits to them. And if we wish to, we can make it really simple and really advanced if we want. So, as a result, I could go in here, add a torus or something. I don't know, let's go in here. This is like making something from, I don't know, like some old school video game. Some like GameCube-esque piece of game art. So let's go up here. So let's say I've created this, and this is the Mega Health Pack or something. So I'm going to select all these, including, notice this is a group instance. This is not like a duplicate of the object. I've created a group instance. I've just hit Control-G. Again, I can name it here. I can name it Mega Health Pack. So now we've got this group instance. Now in my case, I like to move these all to a background layer once I'm done with them. And then we've got two group instances now. We have Health Pack, and we also have Mega Health Pack. These two instances we've created that we can now duplicate around our scene and render rather quickly. Now the cool part about this is that these changes are updated. On top of this being a relatively easy way to construct a scene, it also has the advantage of being immediately updatable. Like, for example, I did not apply a material to this torus or these bolts, but I've already started to throw them around my scene. And one of the really cool things you can do with group instances, as I lean around and try to get a view at the layer stack, is if we go here, and I try to view my Honestly, I probably shouldn't have stacked these. Let's see. Health pack. I'm going to move this to another layer. And I'm going to move the rings to another layer. Anyway, I'm going to keep these on separate layers so I can edit them. But I can go in here and I can say, okay, well, these bolts, they're going to have the same material. And these rings will have a custom material. Let's say, I don't know, their emission. Let's just make it a color mix. And we'll make it based on facing or something. So, layer rate facing. And we'll make it white and, I don't know, blue. Or maybe cyan. So, here, I can go in here and start applying this glowy material that we've got. So here's our video gamey, awesome, super mega health pack of awesomeness. So, here I've gone through and I've applied my materials and everything, and you would expect this to be something that we would have trouble with, right? You know, I've gone in, and normally you'd have to go and duplicate all your objects again, but if I go up and render my instances over here, you'll notice they've updated. And this is really, really cool for workflow. And I actually want to show an entire, you know, how to actually do an iterative workflow with these from the ground up, because I think it's totally worth its own video, but hopefully this will get you using group instances and using all the awesomeness that comes within. So anyway, there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do in here, plus it lets you keep everything as separate objects for convenience and still treat a bundle of objects like a single one. By the way, just a little side note, an object can be in multiple groups at once. That is a total possibility. Also ignore the cat in the background. So as a result, you can have like a table and a table with drawers or table with some other optional add-on that you, again, only have one copy of that you're putting in two groups. That's an option. You don't always have to use group instances for it. So anyway, that's a thing that you can keep in mind. Pretty awesome. It's one of my favorite little things for building environments and populating an environment with stuff. So hopefully this has been informative, and yeah. Peace out. Cthulhu Taken.